Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly study. I'm glad that you're joining with me today as we continue through our study of Genesis. We're currently at the end of chapter 30, which we'll be finishing up today and moving on to the beginning of chapter 31. We've been dealing with the story of Jacob and all of his travails as he leaves the house of his father and his mother, and he makes his way into the household of Lavan. Remember, he marries Lavan's daughters, Rachel and Leah, and they have many children that would eventually will be the tribes of Israel. And Jacob is now on his way out. There have been many children born to him and his family, and he's ready to leave, but he is under the rule of Lavan, his father-in-law, and so, who's also his uncle, or Rebecca's uncle. And so he has to strike a new deal with Lavan in order for him to be able to leave. And so, if we remember correctly, it was a little bit out there, a little bit unclear that Jacob said that he would work for Lavan, and he would then take what would his payment be in order for him to leave. And to kind of finish the contract of working, he would take all the spotted and speckled animals. Again, as a background, this I did not know either before doing some research. Those are the uncommon animals. So Jacob's really staking out an unsure claim, a pretty risky contract to say, hey, Lavan, I'm actually going to take the animals that are less likely to be produced, and those will be my wages, which obviously Lavan quickly agrees to and wants to make sure that happens. And so this week we'll be diving into those verses about what exactly Jacob does to produce animals that are spotted and speckled, and then as he begins then in the beginning of chapter 31 to begin to make his way out of Lavan's house. So stick with us as we read through the verses and then offer some commentary and reflections together. But that same day he removed the streaked and spotted he-goats, and all the speckled and spotted she-goats, every one that had white on it, and all the dark-colored sheep, and left them in the charge of his sons. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was pasturing the rest of Lavan's flock. Jacob then got fresh shoots of poplar, and of almond and plane, and peeled white strips in them, laying bare the white of the shoots. The rods that he had peeled he set up in front of the goats in the troughs, the water receptacles that the goats came to drink from. Their mating occurred when they came to drink. And since the goats mated by the rods, the goats brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted young. But Jacob dealt separately with the sheep. He made these animals face the streaked or wholly dark-colored animals in Lavan's flock, and so he produced special flocks for himself, which he did not put with Lavan's flocks. Moreover, when the sturdier animals were mating, Jacob would place the rods in the troughs in full view of the animals, so that they mated by the rods. But with the feebler animals he would not place them there. Thus the feeble ones went to Lavan, and the sturdy to Jacob. So the man grew exceedingly prosperous, and came to own large flocks, maidservants and menservants, camels and asses. Now he heard the things that Lavan's sons were saying. Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from that which was our father's he has built up all this wealth. Jacob also saw that Lavan's manner toward him was not as it had been in the past. I'm glad you stuck all the way to the end. This wasn't the most interesting or exciting, perhaps, verses that we've read. Perhaps just a little bit strange and weird. But that's okay. The Bible can be strange and weird, and it is my true belief that we read through it. We don't just skip over these parts. So if this week is spent just trying to make sense of what happened, or to try to make sense but knowing that we can't make sense of it, then that is okay, and I hope you're okay with that too. Okay, so Jacob devises this plot. Remember, he's he's got some kind of, I wouldn't call it arcane knowledge, but he's got this kind of magical, ancient knowledge about genetic engineering, about how animals, procreate, and what kind of animals they'll create, and what kind of species they'll create, or types of species. And I don't view these verses scientifically, because I don't think, well, in general, I don't think it would be helpful to view these verses in a scientific lens, because I don't think the Bible is dealing with or aware of science, because this, to me, does not seem scientific that, what the animals will see when they conceive is what eventually they will then help them give birth to. That is more of what we would call kind of ancient magic or ancient rituals or belief, that somehow the way that you conceive, that will somehow dictate what the offspring will be. It's like an old wives' tale. Oh, it was conceived in such a way, and that's why the child turned out in such and such a way. But we know that with our modern sensibilities and awareness, we just know that's not the case. The world just doesn't work like that. Okay, that being said, Jacob is getting nitty-gritty about all of the spotted and speckled animals. I want to bring to your attention the wordplay here. So I've been calling Jacob's father-in-law, what many of you might be familiar with, Laban, as Lavan, right? Lavan is his Hebrew name, and then the transliteration, or the way that they spell it in English, is Laban, but I guess I would hope that that Bibles would have spelled it Lavan, and then you would have known that it said Lavan. Lavan not only is his name, but Lavan also means something. It means the color white. My shirt has green dots, and it's a white shirt, and so if I was in Israel, someone would say, oh, you are wearing a Lavan shirt. You are wearing a shirt that is white. And so already our first verse that we're talking about today talks about what Lavan did. He removes all the spotted and speckled animals, right? Because if Jacob says that's what the animals he's going to go after, he's really going to not give him a chance to even get there. Lavan removes everyone that had white on it. He removes all of the ones that are Lavan. Lavan, the white man, or the white person, removes all that have white. And so it's a good wordplay here. What do I make of the wordplay? Well, what do you make of the wordplay? What do we make of the wordplay? There's something here, I guess I would say, and maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to share it with it anyways, that in this moment, his kind of true essence or reality comes out. He sees himself as white. He sees himself as maybe pure. Again, I'm reading maybe a little bit too into it. And what he thinks is he's acting in a pure way, but truly it's as clear as day, it's as clear as white. The clarity that he's not acting in a pure way. That he, in fact, is doing a disservice to the transparency of his name and his namesake. Take it or leave it. That's what I'll offer about his name and why he's called White. They create a distance between him and Jacob of 3 days' journey, so a really long distance. And then Jacob gets to work. He takes these fresh shoots of poplar and he peels stripes on them, because I guess if the pieces of wood have stripes, then the stripes will then make them, when the animals see these shoots of tree, then when they conceive, or they try to conceive, they will then have stripes in mind and then give birth to stripes. Right, the rods he'd peeled, he'd set them in front of the troughs where the goats come and drink, and then their mating comes when they come to drink. And guess what? The goats brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted young. That's basically it. And then we learned that the man, Jacob, grows exceedingly prosperous. He comes to own large flocks, and he becomes very rich. So we learned that, unsurprisingly, Jacob is cunning and works this out to his benefit, and he does very well. And then As we know in all of our stories in Genesis, there's always going to be conflict, and especially when there's growing, someone's prosperous, there's always going to be conflict amongst that. We saw that, right? We saw that with Isaac, also when he grows prosperous. Remember, this was a number of chapters ago, but remember, Isaac is trying to find places to dig wells. Remember, he digs the same wells that his father Abraham digs and dug, and then the Philistines argue about it, and then so Isaac makes his way to another area to dig his own wells and continues to grow prosperous, and then there's more kind of conflict with him and the neighboring Philistines. So too here, Jacob sets himself apart, does his own thing, right, is involved in the speckled and spotted, and somehow figures out how to do all this, and guess what? Even his growing wealth and prosperity, even though it's done at a distance and seemingly in a very fair way, it's going to bring the ire and the enmity of the other folks, right? So Lavan's sons say, Jacob has taken all of our father's wealth. He's built off his own wealth, right? And Jacob can even see that Lavan's manner toward him had not been in the way that it has in the past. He realizes that something is wrong with their relationship. And so it's going to bring next week a sense of continued conflict as Jacob tries to leave Lavan and his household and set off on his own with his own family. Okay, so I guess I want to take a moment just to pause and ask you what you make of all of this. Why does the Bible include this part here about the speckled and spotted? What's the lesson here? What is it trying to teach us about life, right? If this is what the Bible's about. I think one is to tell you about the cunning abilities and the cleverness of Jacob. Sure. I guess a second is to teach us about, especially in this way, the way that Jacob did it in a very fair way. Right, so that the proceeding conflict between Jacob and Lavan the reader will automatically take Jacob's side, because they know that Jacob did this in the right way, in a straightforward manner. I guess the final piece, and again, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I'm interested to hear how you think about it, and perhaps it might mean something to you, is that by involving himself in this way, Jacob becomes becomes godly in a sense. He has this divine ability to kind of manipulate how life is created, right? That kind of power we ascribe to God. Right nowadays, in the year 2021, we live in a time of genetic engineering, modified engineering, right? We have, watermelons that can grow as squares so that they can fit better into our fridges, or just, genetically modified plants and vegetables that we're just aware of, right? To make tomatoes more red, to create other different types of species of fruit and vegetables that are tasty or whatever it might be. But back then, and especially for most readers of the Bible up until a couple of decades ago, this sense that Jacob has this divine attribute, and I think that's to show the power of Jacob. That he is able to tap into some godly essence or nature of the world that a normal person couldn't do. If a normal person was left to try to mate and breed spotted and speckled sheep, they would have no chance of doing it, but Jacob, the kind of leader of Israel, is able to. And so perhaps the story is here to share with us his expertise. Maybe on a personal note, I would then ask you to think about what are the ways that each of us individually have something unique within us. What are the powers that we have as individuals that others don't, and how do we share that with the world? So let's think about that for this week and today, and I'm appreciating that you joined me. Hopefully you weren't too turned off by the kind of strange nature of these verses, and we'll pick up next week as we continue with chapter 31. Have a great day.